Oh, you key collector app, you're trying to be funny this week. Welcome back to another video. This really popped when I saw it. That to me is a monster increase. Again, this book got hot. This book is ready to go higher. So let's jump right into it. We are back today with another statue review from Diamond Select Toys. Without further ado, let's get into the review. What is good, YouTube? This is Lawrence over at Mighty Comics and Collectibles, and thank you for joining me for another Hot 10 breakdown of the week. If you guys aren't familiar with this one, I take the 10 hottest comics according to the Key Collector app, and I break them down for you guys, letting you know which I'm buying and of course which I'm staying away from. But before we get started in the video, like always, I want to remind you, if you're not a current sub of the channel, do yourself a favor, hit that sub button. Do me a favor, smash that like button because it helps the algorithm out. And of course, if you're interested in merch, I always got you covered. Check out the links below. With that said, let's get into this week's breakdown. Starting off the list at number 10 this week, and a return to this list is a copy of Invincible #1 and the first appearance of Invincible. And we just had a CGC 9.8 sell last week for $3,500, up 8% over the average. I told you guys this a couple of weeks back when this book was on the list, that I am a buyer of this book in a CGC 9.8 only. I really enjoyed the series on Amazon Prime. If you're a long-term holder, I'm definitely interested in owning this book, but if you're not, I'd probably be staying away. At the 9th spot this week is a copy of Conan the Barbarian #1 and the first appearance of Conan the Barbarian. And we just had a CGC 7.5 sell last week for $500, up 14% over the average. We also had a CGC 5.5 sale of $325, up another 18% over the average. Again, another book that was on the list last week. I gave it a thumbs up considering it is a Silver Age first appearance and still can be had for relatively cheap. I'm sticking with that notion. Definitely a thumbs up from me. At number 8 this week, and also back on the list, is a copy of The Boys #1 and the first appearance of Billy Butcher and Huey Campbell. And we just had a CGC 9.8 sell last week for $450, up 23% over that average. I keep telling you guys with this book, I really enjoyed the series on Amazon Prime. However, I don't want to go out and spend the money it's going to take to own this book in a 9.8. For right now, that's the only grade point I want to own. But if you're a big Boys fan and you love it and you love this series and you enjoyed reading the books, this is a must-have for any collector. But for me, I'm staying away. Coming in at the 7th spot this week is a copy of Amazing Spider-Man #14 and the first appearance of the Green Goblin. And we just had a CGC 7.5 sell last week for a whopping $5,040, up 4% over the average. Then we had a CGC 5.0 sale of $2,600, up 8% over the average. Now, you guys know I'm a big Spidey guy. I own this book and I want to own this book. However, at high grades, you have to ask yourself, is it worth paying this kind of money for a high grade first appearance of the Green Goblin? If you're a massive Spidey fan and you like owning high grade books, maybe it is to you. I want to own the book, but I do not want to own super high grade copies of this one. It hasn't gone up so much where I say, hey, I have to have the highest grade that I can afford, but definitely a book I want to own. How about a classic cover? At number 6 is a copy of Batman #423 and this iconic cover by the great Todd McFarlane. And a CGC 9.8 just sold last week for $2,799, up 27% over the average. We also had a CGC 9.4 sale of $328, up 5% over the average. I'm going to tell you guys this. This is an iconic cover of one of my favorite artists, Todd McFarlane, but I still don't want to shell out $2,800 for a 9.8 copy of this one. I'm only buying the first print if you are interested in this book, but right now in this market, I just don't want to spend the money. I love the cover, I love the artist, but the money it's going for, I really just can't do right now. Other than that, if you want to own the book, I'd only be buying a first print and of course the grade that you can afford. At number 5 this week, and still on this list, is a copy of Giant Size X-Men #1 and the first appearance of the new X-Men team. And a CGC 9.8 just sold last week for a whopping $30,000, up only 2% over the average. We also had a CGC 8.0 sale of $3,750, up 1% over the average. To me, that seems like a decent price, $3,700 for an 8.0, but hey, this book has come down so much over the past couple of years. I'm still a buyer of this book for the long term, but right now I probably wouldn't be buying anything if it's not for a 10 to 15 year period. Again, a classic Bronze Age key you must own if you're an X-Men fan, but is now the right time to buy? I'll leave it up to you to decide. At the 4 spot is some 1980s nostalgia. It is a copy of Godzilla #1 and the first ongoing Godzilla series published for the US market. And we just had a CGC 9.8 sell last week for $515, up 25% over the average. You guys know why this book is on this list. The Godzilla movie just came out, and I'm hearing it is absolutely phenomenal. It's got some really great reviews on Rotten Tomatoes. But do I want to spend $500 on this book right here, right now? Definitely not. If you can get this book for cheap in a 9.8, I'd be all over it. If you can't get it for a deal, though, what's the motive to buy it here right now? There's been a million Godzilla movies over the years. I know this one is good, but hey, if you're not a long-term holder, I'd be staying away from this one. Oh no, at number 3 and back on the list is a copy of Wolverine #1 and the first cameo appearance of Yukio and a classic cover by the great Frank Miller. And we just had a CGC 9.6 sell last week for $316, up another 20% over the average. Then we had a CGC 9.2 sale of $165, up 6% over the average. You guys know how I feel about this book. If you just want to own the book, find the grade that's right for you and go ahead and buy it. After all, it is a classic cover. However, I'm not shelling out the money for a 9.6 or higher. It is just not worth it for me. Too many copies out there, but again, a great classic cover by Frank Miller. Buy it just to own the book, but not as an investment. Oh, you cannot keep this book off this list for long. At the 2 spot is a copy of Uncanny X-Men #130 and the first appearance of Dazzler. This is also the second appearance of Kitty Pryde and Emma Frost. And we just had a CGC 9.8 sell last week of $1,648, up 7% over the average. We also had a CGC 9.2 sale of $330, up 32% over the average. My God, people are in love with Taylor Swift, and I'm hearing right now that's a great possibility she's going to have a cameo in Deadpool 3 as Dazzler. Does that make me want to buy the book? It actually makes me not want to buy the book. Again, if you don't own this book already and you're not a giant X-Men fan, I'd be staying away from this one right here, right now, unless you can get a massive deal. For me, it's just not worth it to spend this kind of money on this character. And at the top spot this week is a copy of Star Wars #1 and the first appearance of the OG Star Wars characters, minus a few. And we just had a CGC 9.2 sell last week for $438, up only 3% over the average. Then we had a CGC 9.0 sale of $398, up 12% over the average. I always talk about this book saying if you're a massive Star Wars fan, it's a must own. But other than that, if you're not, it is definitely not an investment book, so I wouldn't need to be spending a crazy amount of money just to own this book. If you want to own it just to own it, find yourself a mid-grade copy, keep it in the collection. Other than that, I'm definitely staying away. Hope you guys enjoyed this list of new books, a few books that have been on the list for God knows how long. Regardless, it is now time for my best buy of the week, and considering there's not a lot of great books on this list that I'd be buying right now, I'm going to say is Giant Size X-Men 1. Is either that or ASM 14. I went with Giant Size X-Men 1 right here, right now, only for the fact that the X-Men have yet to enter the MCU, and if you're willing to own the book for the long term, I do think over time the book will go up. ASM 14 is a great book and a must own, but sometimes I don't want to spend the money on high grade copies of that one. I just want to own the book. Hope you guys enjoyed the video. This is Lawrence over at Mighty Comics Collectibles saying thank you for watching, and I'll talk to you guys soon.